Podcast I'm sorry, this is a podcast, not a video. Okay, so they're not going to be visuals.
Well, if you don't mind, I do have a YouTube with like 5 subscribers. Nobody really watches podcasts unless you're really popular, and I'm sort of popular, but hopefully someday people will go back and watch my YouTube channel. But
okay, and are you going to edit this at all, or is it just going to be straight live?
It's just going to be pretty much just raw.
Okay, great. No, I just need to know, because if I misspeak or something, I'll just correct myself here, as opposed to having you delete something.
Yeah, and if there is something, I can delete it. I have done that before, so.
Okay, great.
No problem. All right, so, well, Dr. Ronald Epstein, I really appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me, especially somebody from Rochester, and somebody that is really big into mindfulness. So I want to say thank you for being on my podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
The first question, actually, you can see the sun. This is the first time I've ever stood up during a podcast. I'm usually sitting down. I got this stand-up desk and I propped it up, and now the sun, because of the time of the day, is right on my face, but we won't worry about that. So the first question that I ask all my guests that come on the podcast is, when you wake up in the morning today, not previously because things change, but when you wake up today, Dr. Epstein, what really makes your heart beat? Like, what makes it sing for the day ahead of you?
I guess, in a global sense, a chance to make an impact in the world. And in a more immediate sense, is being with and around and for people that I care about and love. And that's a lot of people, actually, so I'm fortunate. And to get specific in my work, at this phase of my career, I really want to focus on those things that I feel that I can give to the world that other people might not really be able to do. So trying to find those particular gifts that I have, and I think everyone has those gifts. It's not just that any one person's special, we all do. And I see it almost as a moral obligation to try to discover those gifts that each of us have and to make them as available to as many people as possible.
I love that. I love that you said we all have our own gifts, our own special, unique gifts, and we can figure them out and give it to the world. That was awesome. I appreciate you saying that. Okay. Now, I need to know, because this is a Mindful Impact podcast and I love meditation. What does your practice look like today when it comes to meditation?
I usually sit in the morning for 25 minutes, and I set a little timer, and it has a very nice little gong at the end of it. So that's what you would see if you were looking at me. Okay, I'd be sitting there still on a cushion. The cushion's black. The zabuton, the floor mat, is also black. It's very Zen, and that's really where I got my start back in the 1970s.
Yes.
So when I was still in my teens, I started doing meditation, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's really part of my life. It's kind of the fabric of who I am. So in a peculiar way, I wouldn't know what life would be like had I not started at age 17 and continued for a long time.
Wow, I have a lot of curious questions around that. But first, I want to ask, so during those, I think you said 20 or 25 minutes, what do you do? Intention setting? Do you just quiet and just pay attention to your breath? What do you do during that?
It's probably mostly best described as shikantaza, which is just kind of an open awareness Zen meditation that is not particularly, I used to do a counting the breath practice, which, and then really just kind of let go of that and use it as time to just cultivate attention and presence to whatever happens to be going on internally or externally. When the garbage truck comes by and makes a lot of noise, that's one thing. And if there's a bird outside, that's something else, but it's all phenomenology that I try to assimilate into my moment-to-moment experience.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of sounds like if my son, I have a 1.5-year-old son, if he decides to get up early, you can hear him screaming, "Mama, Dada," in the middle of my meditation, or some days it's quiet. So yeah, that makes total sense.
Right.
Whatever's coming in that moment, right? That's great.
How old's your little one?
He's 21 months now, my son
Oh
Wesley.
boy, a handful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting phase of life. It's so hard to get on a routine,
Yeah.
which I've been big on for the past couple of years, but we're working it out.
But a 21-month-old doesn't really care much about your routine.
Right. Zero care whatsoever.
So I have a new grandchild as of a week ago. So that will be my joy next week when I go down to visit. And so
grandson or granddaughter?
Granddaughter. Yeah.
Oh. And what's her name?
Her name is Summer.
Summer.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I love that name.
Well, it's a reminder that there's some other season than what we're living right now.
Well, you're in Rochester, right? I know you travel a lot for what you do, and you can see outside, it's basically summer today.
Yeah.
I mean, 49 degrees and sunny.
Right. It's as good as we can get.
So you actually just mentioned a little while ago, back in the 70s, you started. I'm curious, like, can you take us back there a little bit? Like, what led you to deciding, okay, I'm going to start meditating today? What was that journey like?
It's kind of hard to describe those times to people who haven't lived through them, but it was really a time of great questioning and people trying to find some meaning in life. And I think historically, the historians will try to put all this together. Maybe it has to do with the Second World War and the decimation from that and trying to reconstruct a sense of the world afterwards. But a lot of us felt pretty discontent with the world order and pretty separated from anybody who was 30 years old and older. There was something that was missing that it seemed that the older generation wasn't seeing. And there was this pursuit of material happiness that really defined American culture at that time. And that a lot of us found, even though we had enough material goods, found that didn't give us a deep sense of connection and purpose and meaning. And so for me, it started out with reading and like Hermann Hesse and the existentialists, and they were all pointing to something that was transcendent and had to do with understanding one's interior. And then there was the drug culture. People were trying to, it wasn't just recreational, there were people trying to use drugs to discover more about who they were. And I was one of them, even though my episodes were very brief, and found that really didn't do it for me either. And then the Transcendental Meditation movement took hold and was kind of popular. There were these day-long courses where you could learn to meditate. So I did that and I got my mantra and subsequently discovered that it was the same mantra that everyone else got, even though it was supposed to be a secret. And there was a little bit of disillusionment with that, but somehow the act of meditating kind of took hold for me. And then I met a friend of mine in high school. His older brother had become a Zen student and had just gotten back from spending a year or two at a Zen monastery in upstate New York. And we were talking, and he taught me how to do Zen meditation and turned me on to some of the literature. There was a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki, which caught hold with me, and there are various other authors, as well as adventurers like Jack Kerouac and Gary Snyder, who were, I guess you might call them woodland Buddhists. They were into nature, and that also appealed to me. So after trying a number of ways to discover who I was, this one really took hold. And then when I was in college, I left college halfway through thinking that I would become a Zen monk and not return to school, and that would be my life. And that lasted for a few months, but that intensity. But I carried with me afterwards the meditation practice, and consistently would engage in meditation every morning, and found a group of people to meditate with when I went back to college, and it's been, I've been meditating ever since.
Wow. You said a couple interesting things there, talking about the 1970s, where materialism seemed to be a big thing for the adults. And I almost, it kind of is happening again in the, as 2020 approaches, right? And then the younger generation are starting to get into into meditation and realizing that, consuming more stuff is not what's making us happy. It's kind of a coming back around full circle almost, I would say.
Well,
right
yeah.
now.
And in fact, if you read, literature from the time of the Buddha, that was the same dichotomy also. He was born a prince and into great wealth.
Yeah.
And he could have had a life of leisure, but instead he chose to wander the world and learn about suffering. So,
yeah.
I mean, in a way, it sounds crazy. I mean, why would you want to leave a palace where everyone would do everything for you and didn't have to worry about anything, and then go out into the world where there was all sorts of misery? And so it has to be a calling in my view. Some people are called to that search and to that quest, and other people are not.
Yeah, and I love how you use your calling to practice medicine and bring mindfulness into the physician field. And I read your book, Attending, as we talked about before this, which is a great book, and I recommend it for anybody, especially so you can become more of a mindful or awareness as a patient with doctors and surgeons and just regular people like you and I. That's kind of the gist I got from it. I wanted to ask you, I guess there's a lot of questions I had about it. How did you bring, I know you brought it into being a doctor and stuff. What about your family? How did mindfulness and how did your meditation practice affect your family?
I can go way back and talk about my family of origin, my parents and my brother. And they were quizzical, but largely oblivious, but eventually came to appreciate that there was something more in life. And eventually my mother started taking yoga classes and doing some meditation, and
cool.
realized, okay, she began to understand that. And my brother works with mentally ill adolescents and young adults, and for him in his work, the idea of calming the mind and being more self-aware just made perfect sense. So even though neither of them are regular meditators, I think there was some acknowledgement. I think that everyone was worried when I went to the Zen monastery and thought that I would never leave. They were wondering, how I was going to make a living.
Yeah.
But I generally met with acceptance in family and friends, and I was a little nervous about, and I should step back. I went to medical school at Harvard because Herbert Benson was there doing work on what he called the relaxation response, which was the effect of transcendental meditation on blood pressure and heart disease. And so I had some choices about where I could go to medical school, and I chose that because it was the one place where meditation and contemplative practice was, making headlines. Oh. And that was also another community that really provided encouragement and support. For me, though, once I was a resident and later in practice, I kept my meditation practice as part of my private life. I mean, people knew that, it wasn't like I kept it a secret, but it just wasn't a topic of conversation in my day-to-day professional work. Until I started thinking about what makes a good doctor and started writing about that. So I started doing research and writing, and mostly for medical audiences about, if you were going to pick a doctor to, do a pretty risky kind of surgery on you that you needed, what qualities would you want? And would it be enough for you to know that this surgeon had done really well on their boards? No, that's a pencil and paper test, right? That's, or now a computer test. It doesn't really, but you'd want someone who's observant, who's a good listener, who's willing to set aside their own biases and and to keep an open mind. And you want someone who's really there, who's not just kind of, distractible, who's able to be present. And then I realized, well, those are the same qualities that you cultivate when you're doing meditation. You want to be attentive and curious about the inner workings of your mind. You want to be open-minded, and you want to be present. So that's where the connection for me happened, was in my role as a medical educator. And I could see students. I mean, I had classmates in medical school who were brilliant and aced all the tests, and but had no ability to connect with people, and no ability to make judgments under uncertainty, and didn't really know how to work in teams. So all of these human qualities that are essential to being a good doctor, they didn't have. And yet they sailed right through medical school and got really good grades and this and that. And I thought, well, there's got to be more than that.
Yeah, and that's what you bring. That, the first thing I noticed when you say something like that is you brought awareness instantly just by asking the patients what they wanted, right? Where a lot of cases, even as a male 35-year-old with a family, I think I want to always tell people what they want, right? But you put yourself in a compassionate place or empathetic place and ask them, and that's a great start.
It's really, for me, it's pragmatic. I mean, if you don't have an open mind and ask people what they want, then you can't give them what they need. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And if we make assumptions about what people need when they come to a doctor's office, we're wrong about half the time. And that's just some of the research that I've done on communication between doctors and patients. I'm not a mind reader. And, if you came to me in the office, even if you came, even if the problem that you made the appointment for was that you had a cough, I need to have an open mind, because it could be that you're depressed. It could be that you have something else going on that's too hard for you to talk about, or whatever. So I just, so I think it's good medical practice to have that open-mindedness.
Yeah. Well, as patients, I guess this is a good time to ask this then. If our physician or who we're talking to, our doctor, is not asking us questions like that, how do we express ourselves? How do you suggest we come bring that stuff out?
It's tricky, because there's a power dynamic in medicine. Generally, people come to doctors when they're feeling vulnerable. And also there's a knowledge gap. Generally, patients don't know as much about their problems as their doctor does. There are clearly exceptions to that, but generally speaking, you've got a pain in your back and you don't know what's causing this, and you're hoping to get some answers. I think it helps to be really explicit about what it is that you want. So a lot of patients come to the doctor just for reassurance, or just to feel understood. So, you've had some back pain for a couple of weeks. Maybe you're worried that it's something serious. Maybe you're worried that it's cancer or a slipped disc or something else that's scary.
Yeah.
And maybe you just want the doctor to say, no, this is just ordinary pulled muscle, and it's going to get better in 2 weeks. So it's not necessarily that you want to be fixed. Sometimes you just want to be understood. And a lot of doctors make that mistake of thinking that everyone is coming into the office feeling a need to be fixed. It's a good thing, because there aren't all that many things that we can fix permanently. There are often things we can manage.
Sure.
But we have to be humble about what we're actually able to do as doctors.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess that answers my question. Because we come, so growing up, just to give you kind of an idea, and I know you've probably heard this a lot, but just for my audience listening, I would go to my routine checkup once every 6 months or once a year. And I just completely put myself in the role of like, I know nothing. They know everything. They're the doctor. I'm just going to listen to whatever they say and go from there. And I think that's a lot of, most people's viewpoint when they walk in, right? Would you agree with that?
I think certain people, yeah. I mean, I think you kind of.
Or am I alone on
No, I think there are people who come in with all sorts of things. There are patients who come in my office saying, "I want this drug," or
like they already know what drug they want. Yeah.
yeah, they saw it advertised on TV. This happens a lot actually. That people diagnose themselves and just or. So anyway, I think there are a lot of reasons why someone would come to a doctor. I would start out by just saying, I'd like help understanding this, or I'm wondering if you can do something to really make a list of your concerns first and start with the things that are the most important.
I like that. So come in prepared.
Yeah, come in prepared. So but being prepared is easy to say and hard to do because it requires some reflection. Right. So if you've got a wart on your finger and you've also been getting chest pain every time you go up a flight of stairs, then you've got to discern which one you want to tell the doctor about first. From my perspective as a doctor, the chest pain is like, pretty scary. Maybe you're about to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Or, well, we can take care of that next week. But you'd be surprised what people, because the wart is something you can see. Maybe that's something that concerns them more. So to reflect before you go to the doctor about what's really important. Let's say the doctor gets called out after 5 minutes. What's the one thing that you want to make sure that the doctor understands? And so being a mindful patient just doesn't mean just simply making a list. It means reflecting about that and thinking what's important in your life.
That's really good advice.
If there's one thing you'd like to have happen at the end of this visit, one issue that you'd want to have discussed, what would that issue be? Even if it's kind of scary or embarrassing. And because, people have a lot of things that they feel shameful about.
A lot of pride. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah. Or, it's, or even just waiting too long. Sometimes people feel ashamed that they didn't come in sooner or feel ashamed that they're coming in too soon, that it's really nothing. If the doctor says, well, this will go away on its own, sometimes people feel foolish. So shame is a part of the equation. Power is part of the equation. And also just lack of reflection is part of the equation. So just reflect about what it is that's the most important.
That's really powerful advice for everybody listening, because so many times we probably walk in thinking that we're, feeling almost like we're the only one that has this issue that we're dealing with, and we're the only one that decided to come in late and too late. But really, I mean, this is all just common stuff that doctors and patients go through, that they deal with, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable and put yourself out there.
And if you have a good doctor, an understanding doctor, they will, they'll be accepting. I mean, they're,
what do you like? I guess what could it? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's and I guess that would be one of the criteria that I'd use for whether this is the doctor for you. Do they listen well? If you have to tell them something difficult or personal or do they listen attentively and make you feel understood and make you feel respected? And so that's really important.
That was exactly what I was going to ask you. So you answered exactly what I was going to ask you, and I almost interrupted there. What to look for. That's good. And be mindful of that when you're in there, and don't be afraid to look for someone else. So one thing we have to understand as patients too, and I read this in your book, was physical burnout of the physicians, right? So we have to understand what, that they're going through, what you're going through too, right? Do you want to talk more about that?
I wouldn't say that they're going through the same thing that you're going through as a patient, but there is a lot of stress in medicine these days,
Yeah.
And especially in the US. And most of it doesn't have anything to do with patients. Most of it has to do with bureaucratic regulations and administrative requirements. And your doctor, if you go for an office visit, may spend twice the amount of time as they spend with you on a computer screen filling out check boxes and notes and completing all of those requirements. So, you're with the doctor for 20 minutes, but then they're spending another 40 minutes doing other stuff. And that balance has just gotten totally out of hand. And doctors are trying different ways to deal with that, but a lot of doctors are getting exhausted and disillusioned as a result of that. And it's just not fair to you as a patient when you're meeting up with a doctor who at the end of the day has just spent 2 hours on the phone with an insurance company to get a patient, a test or a procedure that they believe is essential. So it's hard to give advice for you as a patient as to how do you take care of the doctor, right? But I think that the things that you can do is reduce the doctor's cognitive load when taking care of you. And by cognitive load, meaning talk in short sentences, be clear, don't tell that endless story about your Aunt Mary who had this and that. Try to restrict what you say to things that really bear on your problem and why you're there now. And then if there's time for you to elaborate and those elaborations relate to your problem, great. Because, knowing about family history is important sometimes. But just recognizing that your doctor, you have your doctor's attention for just a limited amount of time, and to present the most important things first.
Yeah.
The other thing is listen. You want your doctor to listen to you. Well, listen to your doctor. And what your doctor says may not be something that you expected, or even something that you'd like. I, like every primary care physician, has some patients who drink too much. They come in with high blood pressure and very frequently just want me to give them a pill for the blood pressure.
Yeah.
I might have to say a message like, it's very easy for me to write a prescription for blood pressure medicine, but it isn't going to work unless you stop drinking. Now that's a hard message to hear. But as a patient, you have to be ready to hear things about, things that you may not like. Or, and I would see it as my job to do that kindly and compassionately, but for me to just simply acquiesce to what the patient was expecting, in my view, would be a form of abandonment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you only have so much time with each person, so it's not, you can't really have a full therapy session to dig into everything, right? It's more, so it's a tough balance, I would imagine, being in your guys' shoes to have to figure out, how to navigate all of that. And we have to understand that as patients too.
Yeah, I think just, the degree to which we all, doctors and patients and everybody for that matter, can recognize that underneath it all, we have a shared humanity.
Right.
Patients get scared, doctors get scared, patients feel rushed, doctors feel rushed. The same emotions affect us all. And it's not your job to fix the doctor or make the doctor feel better. I mean, that's clearly not your job.
No.
But understanding that the doctor's time is limited and that it's important to focus on the most important things first, and also to listen attentively. A couple of other little tricks is if the doctor tells you something, that's, especially if it's complicated or even something simple like, taking the antibiotic 3 times a day, it's useful to repeat that back to the doctor saying, okay, from what I've heard you say is, I should take a warm bath every day and take this pill twice a day and come back and see you in 2 weeks. Okay, whatever it is. So that's a technique we call teach back.
That's really good.
So just to make absolutely certain that you really got it. And the doctor might say, no, I didn't really mean to say that, or when you come back in 3 weeks or whatever it is. But it gives the doctor a chance, because the doctor might ask, do you have any questions? And of course, it begs the answer of no.
Right.
Oh, no, I don't have any questions, but I just want to make sure that I've heard you correctly.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really good advice, because I think a lot of times we have choice hearing, right? What we want to hear, and we're like, yeah, and we walk out kind of confused, which has happened to me before. Definitely.
Yeah, and write things down. So write just a simple list of what your concerns are, because everyone forgets something when they go to the doctor's office, and and um, and and so and then when the doctor's explaining things to you, even if he or she says that there's going to be a printout at the end of the visit, maybe just jot down the important things to remember in case it's not included in whatever they give you.
Okay. I like that. And so
there's also ways of doing that respectfully, you know, and but also just to say, you know, to just put it out there, just to say, gee, you know, I've tried that medicine once and it didn't really agree with me. Can we try something different? How am I going to say no? You know, you know, it makes perfect sense.
Cool. That's great. And I mean, this is Dr. Ronald Epstein. This is somebody, when I was reading his book, you would lose sleep at night over some patients, like, oh man, I think I might have not paid attention to them or been mindful enough to them as I should have been. And I never even thought about that as a patient, that doctors go through that, you know, where you leave the day and you feel like you missed something, or you need to, it's really interesting.
I mean, it's I think it's part of the territory.
Yeah.
It's part of what, I mean, even if you're not on call, or, you know, your phone is off, I mean, you can't help, medicine's complicated. People are complicated.
Yeah.
And inevitably there's going to be times when you think, oh, well, I wonder if it was that, not this, you know, and, you know, for diagnosis, wondering if this person has this that you didn't think of at the time. And so I keep a pad of paper next to my bed, and, you know, if something like that happens at 2 a.m, I just write it down. And maybe it's total rubbish. Maybe I was just, you know, having a bad dream. But sometimes it really does point me in the right direction. It says, oh, that's, you know, that's how the pieces of the puzzle fit together.
I bet writing it down helps you sleep too. Go back to sleep.
Yeah, because I won't keep obsessing about it.
Cool.
But it's you know, I mean, you know, earlier in my career, I would have those events of being interrupted during sleep more frequently. But now when I have one, I really pay attention to it. It's uncommon enough, and think, you know, what's this trying to tell me?
Yeah. I mean, you use this, I think it was in your book, or I heard you say it before, but you're a musician in your background too, right? Yeah. What did you play? What instrument?
I play the harpsichord. So I started as a pianist, and then I got interested in early music. But
that's another part. But you use a beautiful sentence that I really liked, and I'm probably going to steal it and use it on like an Instagram post or something. But it's you say that you're acting in concert with who you are as a person. And I think when you do that, like the reason I brought this up is because you said, now I have a lot less moments where I wake up, but I pay attention now more because they're few and far between. And that's because you're in concert with the person who you are as a person. So I love that. And if you can elaborate more what you mean by that, that'd be awesome for my audience.
Well, you know, I think all of us have well, I should step back and say the socialization of becoming a doctor is very powerful. That is what society expects you will do, how you look, how you talk, all of those things is kind of a narrower set of boundaries than what we live in our everyday lives. And part of that's a good thing, okay? I mean, there are certain topics of conversation that you would talk about socially that obviously you don't talk about with patients. And so those boundaries are useful, but other boundaries aren't. And I think trying to make too rigid of a wall between home and work in a field like medicine, it needs to be a little bit permeable. It needs to allow some things through because they're going to leak through anyway.
Right.
You know, if you had a bad day at work or a patient who died unexpectedly, I mean, things that, you know, the bad things that happen in medicine, you can't just simply flick a switch and turn it off. It's going to be with you. So rather than adopting a really rigid boundary, just say, okay, this has happened. This is going to affect me. It's resonating. What can I learn from it? How can I set it aside when I need to? And for me, writing things down is really helpful. But it's part of being a whole person.
Mm.
And so I want to be the same person when I put on a white coat as when I, you know, put on my, you know, bike shorts and go out for a bike ride. You know, I want to be, it's not that I go to my work at the hospital in bike shorts, you know, but I still am the same person. And I think people get into trouble that way. I know, you know, professionals in medicine as well as other professionals who are really warm and have a good sense of humor. And if you were a patient of theirs, you'd never know it. You know, you know, they have this idea that in order to be a good doctor, you have to be serious all the time. And not that you're always making jokes, but at least you can exude some of that sense of good humor when you're in your professional role.
Yeah, well, now I'm picturing walking in your office as a patient, and you come out and open the door with like tight bike shorts on that you just.
No, that's not the image I'd like people to go away with.
That's funny. That's great. You explained that very, very vividly with clarity. So I appreciate that. Thanks for answering that like that. I was going to ask you something along the lines, and I kind of lost my train of thought when we started talking about bikes and shorts.
Sorry to derail you there, but I thought
no, it's okay.
Yeah, but no, I think there's, I don't know if you've read Walt Whitman, the poet, but in his long poem called Song of Myself, he makes a point there of how humans all contain contradictions and all contain multitudes. Okay, we all contain multitudes. We all have many facets of ourselves, which is part of the beauty of being human.
Right.
And the gift of being a doctor is you get to see that kaleidoscope of humanity every day in your practice. And it also allows you to see that kaleidoscope of humanity within yourself. And as challenging as it is to do a daily meditation practice and to sit still and watch thoughts and emotions rise and dissipate, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, what it also does is it leaves you with this sense that the world is this wondrous place, and you have a part of that. And it's not always joyful, it's not always happy, it's not always pleasant, but it's always wondrous. It always, and so like the day that the world stops surprising me, I guess, is like the day that I don't belong in it. You know, so just to begin to appreciate that richness, I think there's a point beyond which, you know, you were talking about burnout in doctors. There's a point beyond which it becomes really, really difficult to do that. So, for example, our emergency room was built for about half the number of patients that occupy it. It's noisy. There are alarms beeping. There are people, you know, talking with each other. There's sounds over the loudspeaker, all sorts of smells because of kind of the illnesses people come in with. It's sensory overload.
Mm.
Kind of feel like one person's talking in one ear, someone else is talking in your other ear. Some warning sign flashes on your computer screen, and all of this is going on at once. And to try to adopt an attitude of attentiveness and curiosity and presence in an environment like that is really difficult. It's challenging. It's not for the faint of heart.
So how does somebody find, I think in every job, it's important to find moments of mindfulness where we can stop, take some breaths or whatever we need to do. How do you find that in your job then?
Well, there are several habits that I've adopted that actually I've discovered aren't all that uncommon. So, for example, if I'm leaving one patient's room and going to another exam room where there's another patient, the room has a doorknob or a door handle. And so I've come to develop a habit of whenever I touch that doorknob, I just stop, take a breath, and mentally develop an awareness of where I'm at now, what thoughts, feelings I'm having, and then very gently take those that wouldn't be particularly useful for that next encounter and put it on an imaginary shelf next to me. It's as if there's this little shelf there. Because in my primary care practice, I could easily see, an 80-year-old who has metastatic lung cancer and only a few weeks to live. And then the next patient I could see could be a perfectly healthy, happy newborn with proud parents. And so I don't want to be bringing the lung cancer into that room. And if they happen in the reverse order, right, I wouldn't want to bring the residual of that joyous encounter into an encounter where things might not be quite so happy.
Okay,
So
so that's
just that little exercise. So if you do that every day between every patient, and if you see 20 people a day or whatever, or 100 patients a week, and then 4,000 patients a year or whatever it is, you begin to practice this skill of taking a breath, of being present, and that way you can be more mindful. I object a little bit to say that is a mindful moment. Okay, it's a moment to practice being mindful. But the mindful moment actually happens once I'm in the room with that next patient. That's where the
okay.
mindfulness matters. Okay, it's not these little exercises that help me be mindful. It's the sense of presence and connection that you develop when you're actually doing the work that you're meant to do.
I like that. That makes really, really good sense. And is there anything else that you do? And I'm asking this just for anybody listening to get their mind jogging about other ways that they can practice this throughout the day. Is
Yeah,
there anything else you do?
yeah. Before I mention other things, the important thing is to find one or two things and just practice them a lot,
And
rather than having 30 mindfulness techniques. And it's like anything. You just have to kind of hone down, figure out what it is you want to develop, and just practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. It's like
until it becomes second nature.
exactly. It's like learning a musical instrument, or you know, learning to play tennis. I mean, how many times do you practice your serve or your backhand before it really becomes second nature?
You know what's interesting? I forget who wrote it, but somebody wrote about how it takes 10,000 repetitions to become great at something.
Yeah.
And they're proving now in science, because now they can like read our brains and all that, wild stuff that we can do with technology now, that with meditation, with a daily meditation practice, you can actually become great at something with 5,000 repetitions, like cutting it in half now, they're able to say, which is pretty incredible. And I don't know how proven it is, but I've heard it a few times now.
Yeah, no, there's good data that meditation increases your capacity for paying attention.
Yeah.
And if you're paying attention, then those repetitions count for more. I mean, imagine a musician learning to play an instrument and then practicing and practicing, but doing it wrong every single time. Okay, because they're not really paying attention. They're going through the motions.
Yeah.
That you can practice. You can do that 100,000 times and still not learn, because you're basically just you're going through the motions, but you're not really there. And so what a meditation practice teaches you is that a greater percentage of the time you're really there. It's not 100%. You may improve from 30% to 40% of the time.
Yeah.
As humans, we're distracted a lot of the time.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Right. So I think maybe there are some yogis or meditation practitioners who are able to sustain that luminous, undistracted attention for long periods of time.
Yeah.
But not me. I have to keep practicing.
Absolutely. I want to go full circle here from what we talked about in the beginning, actually. You were talking about maybe there's some big time gurus, you could say, right? Ram Dass unfortunately passed away today. I don't know if you...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you were talking about in the 70s. I'm sure he probably had some sort of influence on you a little
Yeah,
bit.
he was transitioning from Richard Alpert, the researcher, to Ram Dass as we know him.
Yeah,
So that was yeah, absolutely. Be Here Now and all of that. He was
yeah,
a very major figure. And
yeah. It was, yeah. My wife actually came in a couple hours ago in my office and was like, "Yeah, did you hear?" Because
wow, but he's one of those people who changed the world.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the first thing I say. I go, I think he left his mark on this world,
absolutely. Yeah.
and that's, I don't know what kind of mark. Personally, I'm going to leave. I'm learning personally to be more kind, more mindful of things. I'm doing this podcast, and I'm not making any money yet from the podcast. I'm doing it just so people can see it, get some advice. Maybe it'll impact their life in a great way or a small way. But, I know that you're leaving your impact on the world with bringing the mindfulness like you do. I mean, for people listening that don't go to his website and see www.ronaldepstein.com, I mean, I said it in the beginning in the intro, but there's, between his books, I mean, the courses you've kind of created within the, there's just so much that you've done. Like I said in the beginning in the intro, but there's so much that you've been through and done and left your impact, and you're continuing to do it, which is like amazing. You must really, really enjoy it.
I get a lot of, actually, the feeling for me is one of gratitude more than anything else. I feel like I've been given the opportunity to share who I am in a meaningful way. And there are lots of people in the world who haven't had that opportunity. And so for me, the, the feeling really is more of gratitude. And I think that's important because uh, it's really not about me, but it's about, in a way, what I've been able to share. And because
Yeah.
I think wisdom never resides in any particular human being. It's just it's always received wisdom. You always got it from somewhere else, right?
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
the gift is being able to share it and to perpetuate that tradition.
I love that. I just, 30, a big social media guy. Do you have Instagram or Facebook that you're on?
No, I don't.
You know what? We're gonna have to get you an Instagram account, set you up before the end of this call. We'll put your first post up. Everybody will know. You'll have 100,000 followers overnight.
Okay, well, yeah,
Do you have any?
I do have a website which right now is kind of seems kind of medieval, but at least it's something.
No, it's great. Your website is very informative. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great stuff on there for anybody looking more mindfulness, learn about meditation, get his book, which is great. Are any of your kids trying to get you to use social media more or anything like that? I'm curious.
My son works for Google,
Oh,
and you would think he's all over social media, and he isn't. He
yeah,
uses email, and we talk using video chat, and that's about it.
that's about it.
And Google Photos now that he has a little baby, but it's no, I use those things judiciously, and I I do have a Facebook account, but frankly, it just didn't hold my attention,
No,
and
no.
because there was too much stuff to sort through, um, and and I didn't feel a need to be more connected in that way, in that particular way.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I can understand that.
but I haven't tried Instagram yet, so there's still there's still hope.
Well, what's funny, Ron, is all of a sudden, at least from what I'm being aware of, Deepak Chopra and David G. Are you familiar? David G. by any chance?
I don't know.
Okay, David G. The names go on and on, but Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, they've all been gravitating towards Instagram to like spread their message and what they're trying to share, which is pretty cool. And some, for the meditation teachers and gurus, it's interesting to see them on there. They actually express that. I see it in their messages. They're
Oh,
like,
I don't have
man,
anything against it. I think that all of those media are intrinsically neutral. It just depends how you use them, and so. And anyway, after the call, you can give me an Instagram lesson. How about
well,
that?
obviously, I just want to follow you and see what you have to say and your insights throughout the week.
That means I have to say something every day. So,
now, yeah.
That's a lot of pressure. So.
That's funny. We're fellow. When I saw that, I literally Googled. I'm like, mindfulness in Rochester, New York. Like, I'll be honest with you, I had no idea who you were. I'm not a physician. I'm not a doctor. And you were one of the.
Yeah, the other, my colleague Mick Krasner and I developed all of these mindfulness programs together. So, and he's in full-time practice, and clearly I've written a lot about that whole realm, but I think the ideas really come from a shared source.
Okay, Nick Krasner, you said?
Yeah. So, and some of the research that we published, he took the lead on. So that's important to keep in mind. We don't do this work alone.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for putting him out there. Hey, is there locally, Ron, is there a place that you suggest, like a retreat or a outing? If you've ever been to like a silent retreat or out to like a mindfulness meditation, I don't know, resort or something somewhere close by?
Well, there are places all over the country. I know your listening audience is not just restricted to Rochester, but in Rochester we have one of the oldest Zen centers in North America, right here downtown on Arnold Park, and they have a retreat center in just outside of Batavia. So it's about half an hour's drive west of here. And then there's a place called the Springwater Center in Springwater, New York, that runs sessions and retreats for the general public. You could just sign up and go. And they also have, they're really excellent. And there are several Tibetan Buddhist groups that have meditation retreats as well. So Rochester actually has a fair bit going on. What's
the downtown one called?
It's called the Rochester Zen Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It has a long history, and it's a beautiful building, and there are many opportunities locally. I think if you're just beginning to do meditation, Zen meditation may be a little bit more difficult to access, just because the practice is a bit more demanding in the beginning, but there are all sorts of opportunities here and elsewhere. Most beginning meditation courses, if you will, emphasize what's called a Vipassana approach, which is derived from the Buddhism in Southeast Asia. But all of these really point towards the same thing, the same qualities of mind. It's just the methods are slightly different.
Yeah. And what's the main difference between like Vipassana and Transcendental Meditation?
Well, Transcendental Meditation relies on a mantra, a word that you repeat over and over to yourself with your breath. Whereas Vipassana meditation has two forms. One is where you just develop an awareness of your breath. You don't say anything in particular, you just use it as a focus for your attention. And the other is more like what I was describing before, an open awareness meditation, where you just allow yourself to take in whatever happens, whatever you feel on the inside, as well as sensations that come from the outside.
And then one last thing is, what about Zen meditation, if you get it?
Zen meditation is starts out being fairly focused. Actually, they often teach you to count your breaths. You count from 1 to 10, and you start again at 1. But the retreats that they run are often highly ritualized. They really use, they take the Japanese traditions and have really brought those traditions across to the U.S. So part of it is, so there's chanting, often in Japanese, sometimes in English, and just even the way you eat your meals, the way you walk in and out of buildings is highly ritualized. I think it's quite beautiful. It has and the art that comes out of Zen Buddhism is really quite appealing to me, which is part of what drew me to Zen as opposed to other traditions. But so they all have their own flavor, and I think it's just, if you're interested in learning to meditate, it's worth just visiting a few and seeing what appeals to you, seeing what.
I appreciate that. Now, the final question I want to ask you here is a question I ask everybody. If you can go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, or give your 18-year-old self a couple pages of a book to read, and they were open to it, you were open to it, what would you say to them, or what would you, give them for some advice?
I know this is really cliched, but I think at age 18, we're all worried about who we are, and also whose expectations we need to meet, and the advice to thine own self be true, I think really speaks loudly to that. At age 18, I didn't have the confidence to trust myself and to know that my instincts were going to lead me in some direction that might be fruitful. And the other piece of advice that I would give my 18-year-old self is never worry alone. So if you're worried about something, find someone or somewhere to share that worry.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That's great. Okay, there we go. Good. Podcast complete. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, where can I send you a recording of this if you wanted to throw it up on your site as another, if you liked what the questions I asked and stuff like that?
Would you be sending me a link, or would you be sending me the actual recording?
I will send you a Google document file, so you just click it.
Okay, yeah, just send that to me to my email.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I had your email or your assistant's email.
Oh, okay. It's Ronald_Epstein at urmc.rochester.edu.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I realized inadvertently that my Zoom automatically is set up to record video record all my Zoom sessions. So this actually did record.
Oh, nice.
Sorry about that. I should have told you, but I didn't intend to record it. That is to say, if there's anything that happens at your end where you lose something, I've got a copy of it.
Beautiful.
I'm not going to use it. I would otherwise delete it, but I'm not going to for anything. But if you need it, just let me know. I'll keep it for a week or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it takes too much disk space. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks. I appreciate it. A great time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
You take care.